Hello everyone. This video is um, going to be a little bit of a departure from our other videos, which are more walkthroughs and kind of step-by-step guides. But this video, I wanted to talk about the national exam and also kind of touch on some things for your midterm. So it's going to be a little bit of a two-in-one. But I have noticed a lot of questions in the discussions related to the national exam or related more to the scope of the class and how, quickly we're moving through things. So I do see that anxiety and that stress, particularly when we're faced with really contradictory or otherwise unique coding scenarios that maybe don't follow the regular flow of a section or of CPT coding in general. And so I see some focusing on those issues. And then I have attempted to redirect them, but I haven't particularly explained why. So that's what I wanted to do with this video, is talk about your CPC national exam. So the CPC national exam is the exam that you would take to get your CPC credential, and that is with the AAPC. That's this web page I'm showing right now, and they are the people who offer the CPC exam and uphold that credential. It's a very standard credential. A lot of coders, probably most coders, start with the CPC if they are new to the coding world. If you are already a coder, then you may do the CCS or another coding certificate or certification. But the CPC is very, very standard. And so that is what we focus on in this course and in ICD-10. And then if you do one of the other classes, the practicum, that's the goal, is to make sure you're prepared for this exam. So I wanted to show you a little bit about it and kind of show you where you can find these resources to make sure you understand why it is that we're focusing on what we focus on in this class. Okay, so if you want to go to the aapc.com, you can go up to certification. And just CPC is the very, very first one. There's a whole bunch of other certifications you can get through the AAPC, but CPC is the standard. It's kind of the entry level certification that you would want to get. It's what most people are familiar with if they talk about coding or the AAPC. So if you want to look through this, there's a lot of really excellent information just on this page that I would highly recommend you review. It includes some stuff about supplementary courses and education. There's even links to practice exams. Some of those are going to be paid resources. So if you complete your studies with Cowley and feel like you need some extra support or help, you can definitely purchase that through the AAPC. There are some free resources as well. If you research it, there's a couple of free study guides and things like that that you can get through the website as well. But lots of great information here. If you find yourself particularly weak in one area, such as like anatomy or medical terminology, they have some supplementary courses as well. Now, if you're not wanting to pay for things like that and just need kind of a refresher, you can reach out to me and I can show you some resources. There's a few free resources out there that can help you, particularly with medical terminology. All right, so then we talk about the actual national exam. So the national exam is available in two formats. You can take it physically, which would be a 4-hour test. So that's in person, and it's usually local. There's usually don't have to travel too far. There's several in Kansas every semester, so you shouldn't have to travel too far. If you're kind of more south, then there's definitely some in Oklahoma as well. So you can definitely take it in person, or if you are unable to do that, either because of distance or time or whatever other reason, you can take it online, which is a great option as well. And that test is 2 parts, and each one is 2 hours each. Okay. And this is obviously, a lot of people are going to prefer to do it online. We're used to doing everything online nowadays. The difference that you might want to keep in mind is that you have to have an external webcam for this. So that means it can't be one that's built into your computer. Yes, you can have that. Most computers have webcams now, but you also would have to purchase an external one as well. And so that's so you can show them the room. You can show them like under the desk, behind the computer, all kinds of stuff. You want to kind of look around, have a proctor live proctoring you, and they want to check everything out. So both of those options are available. And but the format of the test is the same. So and that is the 100 multiple choice questions. And like with the online, it's taken in 2 parts, and I'm not sure if those are divided evenly. I would guess they are, but there might be some variation there. It might be 45 and 55 or something like that. I'm not quite sure. But the physical, if you took it in person, it would just be 100 multiple choice questions all at once. Okay. So that's the basic structure of the exam. If you are interested in finding where your in-person exam is, it's right here. You can take a look and check. The online, there's unbelievable availability. Because there's always proctors willing to proctor it. So you could do it, at 6 a.m. if you wanted to. That wouldn't be a problem. And you can also split those 2 parts. So if you wanted to do one part one day and the next part the next day, that's totally fine as well. But if you want to see where the in-person exams are, you can see them right here. Again, this is showing you if you wanted to, so you will have to pay for the exam. I'm not quite sure how Cowley does it, if that's part of your tuition fees or not, but you can definitely come and look and see if you want to buy additional practice tests or study guides or anything like that. Those are things that are available. All right, and then you kind of scroll down because you think, oh, maybe this is maybe this is the end of the resources. It's definitely not. So that's why I wanted to show you in person or through video, I suppose. It gives you a little bit of information about why CPC exam is important. What I will say is that the difference between the CPC exam and coding is night and day. These are 2 very, very different skills and 2 very, very different skill sets. But the reason why the CPC exam is valuable to have that credential is 1, it shows that you understand the manuals, and 2, it understands that you can correctly assign codes under a time crunch. Okay, and because coding is often going to require you to very quickly and accurately assign codes. So that's what the benefit is. We get into a lot of the minutia of why this code instead of that code, why this section instead of that one, what about this unique, crazy situation I heard about? And that's all very interesting and great, but the CPC exam is testing you on the most common applications of that CPT manual and your ICD-10 manual, and also the HCPCS. So it's not trying to get into the nitty-gritty of all the possible scenarios you could run into. It's looking at the most general ways that we could apply these codes. So in some sense, that is great. And in some sense, that's really challenging because it's still a lot of material, right? When you're in the real world, you're going to be focused on likely 1 to 2 sections of the CPT manual, a few sections out of the ICD-10, and you're going to become an expert in that section, right? And the CPC is wanting you to look at everything. So it's a big difference than what you'll be doing in the real world, but it is still very valuable. So this is the part I want to show you right here is the exam breakdown. And this shows you exactly how they structure the exam, including how many questions will be pulled from each part of the manual. So you'll see here 10,000 series. There are 6 questions from that. And you can read about it here. And so that'll explain what it's about. So this is going to be like the integumentary system. And then musculoskeletal system. So when we look at those, we say a series, so we say the 10,000 series, that's the codes that we're looking at, the code numbers, right? And so the ones that are going to start with the 1, the 2, the 3, and so on and so forth. That's what we're looking at here. And then we do have 6 questions from E&M, everybody's favorite thing. And there's going to be a variety of questions from there. And then 4 questions from anesthesia, 6 from radiology, 6 from path and laboratory, and then 6 from medicine. Okay, and then we have a few questions from medical terminology, which no, that's not something that's covered in this class or your ICD-10 class, but it is an expected skill. So you do need to be able to understand medical terminology. And then the same for anatomy. And that is why I always emphasize the illustrations that are in the manuals, and I point those kind of things out because those kinds of resources are going to be helpful for you on the national exam, particularly if anatomy is not your best subject. There are 5 questions about ICD-10 diagnoses, which doesn't seem like a lot, right? So why did we spend a whole however many weeks, 8 weeks studying ICD-10? That is because it does also apply to the coding guidelines. So these 2 things kind of work together. Yeah, only 5 of the questions are about the diagnosis codes, but 7 questions are about the coding guidelines. Okay. And then also it's going to play a role in this new section, which is the cases. So now this is new. This is not there even last year. They did have longer questions and some case studies, but now they have specifically 10 cases, and they include ICD-10 codes, HCPCS codes, everything kind of all together. So kind of when we look at reports, it's kind of the same thing. So these are kind of a combination questions. So even though, yes, we did spend 8 weeks looking at ICD-10, and it looks like we only have 5 questions about it, there's actually quite a few more because we're still going to look at coding guidelines, and it is going to apply to 10 cases. So there's quite a few questions wherein you'll need to know about ICD-10. Compliance and regulatory. This section is what all of that stuff when we look at the very beginning of coding, your very first introduction to coding. Anytime we are talking about fraud, abuse, HIPAA, who publishes the CPT? That was a question on my national exam. Who publishes it? Hint, it's the AMA. So it's on the very front of your manual. RVUs, things like that we've talked about. And maybe it feels like filler information or just background information. There are 3 questions about it on the national exam, so they're good to know about. And then you'll see that we have 3 questions about HCPCS, which I've already talked about in one of our videos as well. So that is what I wanted to show you. This shows you the entire what the content of the exam is actually going to be. And you do need to get 70 questions correct. You have to get a 70% on the national exam to pass it. I think you should aim for 100, but give yourself a little leeway there. But this content is why I don't spend too much time talking about the unique scenarios. The wild situations that could possibly potentially come up, because you will see these are the questions that you're going to be asked, and none of them, they emphasize this repeatedly, none of them are trick questions. No one is trying to trip you up. That doesn't mean they're not going to be difficult. That doesn't mean they're not going to put very similar answers next to each other, but they're not going to say, here's a situation that follows all the coding guidelines, and then pull the rug out from underneath you and say, oh, just kidding. This is that one situation out of a million where you would actually do something totally different. So that's not going to come up. Okay. They're going to be very straightforward, following the guidelines, following the most typical application of the codes. All right. There's a ton of questions down here that you can look at that really help clarify what we do as coders and what it takes to actually get that CPC credential on your name. It also has approved code books. You do not have to use the books that they sell. You can use any ICD-10 or HCPCS. AMA is the only person or the only publisher for the CPT. So that's not, there's no variation there. But you can use any publisher. And then they do want you to have the current year. You can check with them whenever you are preparing for the national exam, because I know usually they will allow the previous years as well. So that's something to check with them about when you do schedule your national exam. So I'm going to switch over to the book for just a minute so we can kind of talk about what we looked at here, and then also some of the midterm content. All right. So here we are. Here is our CPT 2022. All of our tabs are here. Yes, you can have tabs on the national exam in case you were wondering. Just a few things I wanted to go over, and that kind of overlaps with the national exam and also your midterm. They're both going to be multiple choice, so that's really helpful, right? You will know generally which section you're going to be working off of from the codes that are offered, because generally they're going to try to offer codes that are fairly similar. So generally you'll kind of know, hey, I'm working in the 900s, or I'm working in, the 9000s, or I'm working in anesthesia or something like that. So you'll be able to figure that out from the multiple choice offerings. But one of the things that I wanted to explain, because I've seen some confusion about this, is when you know which section you're working in, how do you find a code? And the way that I do it, and there's two ways that you could do it. You can go from the table of contents if you know what section you're working in, or you can go through the index in the back. Okay. So say you are doing a removal of a benign lesion. So we know we're working on skin. Maybe it's on the leg or something like that. So I know, hey, this is in the skin, so it's going to be in integumentary system. I know where the table of contents is for that. And I just come and find the main section that I'd be working in. So removal is also the same as excision. And this would direct me to the right page. So then I go to 101. Make sure you're in the right page, on the right section, because here I could have very easily come to excision lesions, but this is malignant. Okay, we're looking for benign right here. So then I know I'm in the right section, and it gives me a little additional portion of guidelines here. This is important to check through. Yes, if you're in an exam environment, you probably aren't going to have the opportunity to carefully read through this, but you might be able to skim it. That's why you should be practicing in these sections so you can read them before. And then you would come through, and most of the sections are fairly small, and you'll be able to see how they are laid out and be able to select the right code from this section. Okay. So here we have excision of benign lesion, except skin tag, trunk, arms, or legs. And then we find out that the differentiating factor is the size. Okay, it's the diameter. So we'll look at our documentation and identify the diameter, and then select the correct code from there. Okay, so in this scenario, all of these codes underneath, see how they are indented. This lets us know that these codes depend on this main one, and everything before the semicolon applies to all the codes underneath. So the only thing that's different is the diameter. So this code would be excised benign lesion, including margins. For trunk, arms, or legs, excised diameter 0.6 to 0.10. Okay. And then we'd select our correct code from there. If you are unable to do that, you have no idea what section you are looking in, your other option is to come to the index and you will look it up based on keyword. Okay. And most of the time, I would recommend going by the procedure that is being done. But there are some cross references here. So, say you were having, trying to think of a procedure on the omentum. Here we go. Here, they do have some body parts, and that will help you with. It'll help you identify the correct code that way. So we'll say an excision, a flap, all unlisted procedures and services, and it'll direct you to the right code section here. Okay. So there is some cross-referencing here in the index. The easiest way to find something, in my opinion, is to go by the procedure name. Okay. That's just my personal thought on it, but you will find that there is some overlap. Okay. So that's the other way to do it, is to go through here. Just like in the ICD-10, when you go from the alpha, it directs you to the code. It doesn't mean that you can use this code blindly. You still need to go back and check and make sure, yes, this is referring me to the right code, and there's not another code underneath it that's more appropriate, because it may direct you to one of the more general codes like this, and your correct code is indented underneath it. Okay. So you still need to double check, even if you code from the index. All right. So about the national midterm, it's 20 questions, each is 5 points. I reviewed it. It is from the publisher, so I didn't create the questions. But from what I could tell, from what I was reading, about half of them are questions that you have seen before. So they are not going to be crazy new questions you don't have any context for. Some of them you have seen exactly those questions before, about half of them. And then the other half are questions that are very, very similar to other questions that you have seen. They're derived from those chapters. So it's not new material. It's not written in a different way. They are all multiple choice. And they are all fairly straightforward. I did not see any kind of trick questions or anything like that. My recommendation is to go through and answer the questions you're confident about first, and then go back and go through the questions that you were less confident about and answer those. And it is multiple choice, so you can look up each code if you need to. As always, I would recommend keeping a note card with you. If you have a question, one of the questions look weird, you don't like the options, it doesn't make much sense to you, that's totally fine. Remember, we might have something show up that's not exactly right, and that happens. Just write it down, write down the question. I would say write down the number, but they're randomly assigned, and they're from a question bank, so not everybody's tests are going to be the same. But I would at least write down, say like maybe it's number 6 and what it's referring to. So maybe it's referring to integumentary. And if you had like a question or a concern, say option A looks inversed or something like that, because that can happen too. I've had that plenty of times where numbers were inversed or switched around, or deleted code. We've seen those a few times. I didn't see any in the codes that I was looking at. I didn't see any deleted codes, but it still happens. It's a really big test bank and there's multiple courses, so I could definitely have missed something. So just keep something like this with you. Do your very, very best. And then if there is a question like that, you can put it in the discussion and I will review it. Nobody panic, because I always review all the tests. I make sure everything is equitable and nothing was super far out of the norm to be asked. And I will correct, your scores as needed if something was just not fair or not reasonable to ask of you. So don't worry about that. If you do have specific questions prior to the midterm, you can definitely post them in the discussion. I'll be checking that closely this week, or you can email me and we can kind of work through those things together. If there's a certain section you found particularly difficult, yes, I'm sure E&M is one of them. There weren't too many E&M questions in the question bank, but that doesn't mean that a few of them won't come up. You can definitely send me questions and we can go through it. And I'll make sure that you have some kind of response or guidance prior to the midterm due date, which is at the end of the week. Okay. That's all I have for you now. And please be on the lookout for additional resources and let me know what you're concerned about and how I can help. Thank you.